So I'm here today to talk to you about getting an idea where tech and music come together to market and be successful. Just a quick preamble of who I am. My name is Vicki Nauman. I run a consultancy and advisory business out of Los Angeles. I've been doing that for 10 years, but I've been working in digital music since 2000. And I never would have thought that 24 years later I would still be doing all of this. But over this, when you have history in this business, you see and hear startup pitches, enterprise companies that want to do things. You work directly. I've probably worked with over 200 companies, and there are patterns. And that is what I'm talking about today around success and the patterns that I have observed and some of the common mistakes. So introducing the concept, and I will tell you there's a QR code at the end, which is an article that I wrote on this for Music Business Worldwide. So the first thing that we all know is that technologists flock to the music business, and they do that for a handful of reasons. Platform adoption, artist to fan bond and relationship, and personalized, scalable engagement with global users around music. What they oftentimes, especially people from the technology business, what they oftentimes don't know is that music is incredibly a double-edged sword. It's got a very complicated value chain. There are laws and norms that sometimes are in conflict with each other. It's very counterintuitive, and it requires money. So this is not necessarily a friendly business for a bootstrapped startup. So I had been going through a process of seeing companies that seemed like they had everything and they were failing. And what I started to really do was pull it apart. And you know, the music business, you know, being an entrepreneur in the music business, you need more than product market fit. Everybody in the room probably knows what product market fit is, where you've got customers, you've executed on the product, maybe you have revenue, you can move to the next stage of fundraising, growth, and investment. Oh, sorry. But there are these other two concepts, which are industry market fit and investor market fit, and those are what I want to really dive into. So when you think about the music industry, the companies, there's basically 6 companies here, and they probably control at least 70% of the market on the publishing and the master recording side. You really can't succeed in this business if you don't find a connection with these companies. So there are really 3 critical requirements. The first is that the entrepreneur has identified a music problem or an opportunity, and industry stakeholders want that problem solved or they value that opportunity. There are many problems in the music business, but the industry in some cases is really not interested in you solving them. The second thing is that the company business model needs to map the cost of the licenses or the cost of building the technology to the size and the value of the opportunity. A really good example here is, you know, we want to help independent emerging artists collect all their revenue streams. And then you find out you need, you know, $10 million to build a tech stack and do business development and understand the entire ecosystem, and those artists earn less than $100 every year, so there's no value there. And the user offer is valued such that users give you mind share and wallet share. This is a crowded marketplace in music, and the expectations are really high. So showing investors and proving that you can actually capture a customer base is critical. So here are some common errors and a little bit of advice. Rights problems. These are things like, you know, getting the sound recording, the publishing to match up, getting all those pennies to cross borders and get to the right people. Oftentimes the tech stack here is too expensive in proportion to the revenue potential of solving metadata, systems, and rights problems. Startups oftentimes build and then they get a few layers deep and they realize that they're in the abyss and they don't remember why they exist. And a really important piece that many people don't understand, especially coming from tech industry, which is all about efficiency, is music stakeholders really don't care about efficiency. It is not a priority for them. Signing artists and developing artists and getting revenue is a priority. Don't go talk to them about efficiency. In licensing, I do a ton of licensing, a lot between music companies and gaming companies. It's very relationship driven, so if you don't have relationships and you're kind of crashing around the industry, people don't know you, they don't trust you, how would they know that you're going to use music in the way that you say you were going to use it? There's also frequently a mismatch between the music that you need and what you have to offer. So there's money, or there's data, or there's fame for artists. If you don't have any of those, you don't have a customer base yet, you don't have money to pay in advance, and you can't help an artist become more famous, you probably don't have something that will be valued by the core industry. Labels and publishers will not coach anyone. A lot of people I've talked to, they've spent 18 months going around talking to everyone in the industry, and then they come to me and I say, no, that doesn't work that way. That has to be in this kind of a business model. And they said, well, why wouldn't anyone tell us this? It's like, this is not the industry, it's not labels and publishers' jobs to inform you about how rights work. And I think this is another piece, like I hear a ton of complaints, and there's plenty of history of why the music business has not shown as much support of entrepreneurship. However, rights holders do not want their music in every new product and app. They simply don't. They want fewer things in the market that are going to work. And if you want to be young and entrepreneurial, don't go to Universal. Start with an independent label or start with someone who really believes in you, but don't expect rights holders to all flock to your idea. In the artist to fan space, there's a lot of activity in this. And so one of the issues is artists have gatekeepers. They have managers who are gatekeepers. They have labels who are gatekeepers. So there's a lot of spinning wheels of going around and talking to artist management companies one by one, going and talking to different artists. And then what happens is then the artist goes on tour, or another shiny object comes along, and they lose focus on you. The other thing that's happening in the artist to fan space is a lot of times, if you don't actually have the music in the app, you're just trying to engage artists and fans on some social level, it's going to be really difficult because music is the bond. And artists don't control that. Managers don't control it. Labels and publishers control it. So even if you spend all this time going to artist managers, you probably have to go back to labels. Artists will not do much to support your app, and don't expect, if you have a business where your entire concept is we're going to have artists message on social media and tell all of their users to leave Spotify and leave Instagram and come to our app, if that's your strategy, do not do it, because artists will not do this. Artists are artists. They might find it interesting in a honeymoon period, but that honeymoon is incredibly short. And then it becomes the manager's responsibility. Managers usually get 15% of artist revenue. So are you producing revenue that's going to motivate the manager to do the things on behalf of their artists? So these kinds of things don't just kind of, it's like puzzle pieces that don't quite fit together. And then on music business models, functionality, audio versus audio visual, and copyright law drive all of the models. And there are, people like me who, this is what we do every day. We can look at things and put them in categories. But a lot of times what we do is have things like someone's doing audio visual, but they want the full catalog that's in Spotify, but that's audio. And there are different rights, different laws, and different risk management you have to do under the hood. The other thing that is not in here is that a lot of times companies want to use Spotify or Apple's APIs. instead of doing licensing and instead of integrating music. And I always ask companies that do this, is this a hobby or is this a business? And they say, it's a business. Okay, well, if it's a business, you need money. So if you use Spotify and Apple's APIs, unless you get an exception, which is extremely rare, you can't monetize anything. And then you have to build things again. So I really encourage people to kind of be able to think a few steps ahead. All licensing requires some commitment, some financial commitment, an upfront advance, minimum revenue guarantee, a commitment over time. You know, this is not a true partnership type of business where you're just going to work in collaboration and no money is going to change hands. And the last thing I will say about this is every time there's a major technological change for music, we get a new crop of startups who come into the space and say copyright law is antiquated and unworkable and we're going to disrupt it. This happened in 2000 when the Napster originally disrupted it, then doing legally downloaded. That companies said that that time we figured it out, streaming, this doesn't work, we figured that out. AI is next, live streaming, lots of things have happened in between. But the industry is really, really strong, and they have lawyers, they have people who troll the internet, and so just taking an approach of asking for forgiveness and trying to disrupt this industry, like that forgiveness is the most expensive forgiveness you will ever have. And then a few pieces of advice. Understand the value chains and stakeholder motivations. Even if it makes your head hurt, it's really complicated, but it's critical so that you are sitting across the table and you understand what the person you're negotiating with wants. Engage advisors and experts. There's tons of people out now who are experienced, who act as advisors and consultants. Have them guide you and help you. Build a product that requires little to nothing from artists. You have to build a platform that can operate with you or with some sort of platform basis, not asking the artist to actually engage. The second concept that I'm going to talk about is investor market fit. Investment in music tech is specialized and challenging. The music financiers and investors have a really, really long and averse history to music. This is because of past failures and losses that they've had. It's also so complicated and they do not want to understand it. They do not care if people don't use identifiers consistently. They don't care if sound recordings and publishing aren't matching. They don't want to know any of this. They're also a little reticent about music because it takes a while. It's slow. It's not like you hang out a shingle and you pop and you have 1 million users. There's also some of the investors right now are kind of have this mindset that there's only one Apple, there's only one Google, there's only one Facebook. And so everything they look at, they say, who's going to be the one in this category? It's very flawed because I think there's a lot of room, especially in music, to have many, many different companies, but that is what a venture capitalist is going to look at. The other issue is opportunity size is too small. And of course, third-party IP that's eating at your margins. You will never get 100% revenue. You will have to pay rights holders or artists or somebody in the industry if you are doing anything with sound recordings. And lastly on this, music is high complexity, low margin. And so if you think of a quadrant, that's like the airline business. You don't really want to be in high complexity, low margin businesses. You want low complexity, high margin. So with music, you have to kind of counter this. So a few pieces of advice. Think about your trajectory. Do you want to be a niche business? Do you want to grow at scale? Do you want to exit and sell to someone? This is a really important thing because who you talk to get investment money is going to depend on where and what you think you want to be. You should also get to revenue as quickly as possible because investor expectations and priorities change constantly. It's probably like, 5 to 8 years ago, it was growth at all costs. Customer acquisition, we don't care about revenue, we don't care about losses, we just want growth. Then it switched to we need a viable business model. And so then everybody was running around trying to figure out viable business models. And now it's you need revenue. So imagine you raise money from someone under the growth at all costs, you come back for your follow-on round, and they're like, well, why do you have all these losses? And where's your revenue? And where's your business model? Well, we don't have one because we were growing at all costs. And now you've missed the investor. Ensure you're aligned with investors' goals. And this goes back to the first point of, is this growth at all costs? Is this about scale? You don't want to be talking to an investor who wants a unicorn and your business has a total addressable market of $20 million. There will just be a mismatch and you'll be wasting everyone's time. You should also put a slide in your deck on how you can de-risk the music business. That can be having someone who understands it. It can be, use just normal language. Don't get into the really deep industry nomenclature. And finally, don't expect investors to give you money to pay rights holders. This happened and many people in here, probably I look around the room, there's probably a lot of people who were, not they're probably in, high school at that time. But from 2000 to probably 2008, there was an enormous amount of money that flew into the music business. But what happened is all these investors invested in companies that needed music rights, and then the companies that raised the money, you raise 20 million, then you have an obligation to pay the labels 18 million, and then there was no money left to operate. And so the investment community are like elephants, they have the best memories imaginable, and there's still this lore that is going to happen. So if you have deals, music deals, you have to prove your model and you have to get to market before you ask anyone for money. They're not going to give you money to pay advances. Is this possible? And I say, yes, it is possible to achieve product, industry, and investor fit. And if you can get there, it's an enormous moat around you because most companies can't do this. They can't wrap their head around this complicated industry that they've gotten into. But I've just listed a handful of companies here. Study these companies. These are all one-time startups, and they have created viable businesses. Some of them raised a lot of money at the beginning. Some of them didn't. Some of them had really wealthy founders. Some of them don't. But they found all three of these things. They found problems and solutions that are going to address all of the product, the industry, and the investor fit. So this is a QR code to the article that I wrote on Music Business Worldwide. There's a lot more information in there. But what I want to do is before I get off the stage, I want to ask Tyler from Gimme Radio a couple of questions about, do we have a mic? I just want to ask him a couple questions. I was on the board of Gimme, and I've known Tyler forever, but I think, Gimme Radio is a really good example of a company that built something great. It really worked. And you, in the end, were able to raise money, but you couldn't get all the pieces to come together. So tell the audience just a brief kind of, how did you start and what was Gimme Radio?
Well, Gimme at a high level was you hear a lot about fan engagement, super fans, communities. It really was a community-driven music service that was a community of fans and artists. It was artist-hosted programming, and it had very interactive components and multiple ways to monetize those fans. We had about little under 500,000 registered users, 100,000 125,000 monthly actives. We were doing over $100,000 in revenue a month. And it was not big enough because we had product market fit. We definitely had industry market fit. If you look at our cap table, it was Sony, Warner, Telefonica, Concord, Metal Blade Records. I mean, it was everybody in the industry, but there was only probably about 200,000 out of 7.5 million that I raised that was from traditional VCs in the space. And so that last part, the investor market fit, was where we really didn't succeed. We came up at a time when there was this thought that Music+Tech, music companies, were VC fundable, and everybody was like, hey, we can all be the next Spotify, we can do this, we can do that. And so that was kind of the trajectory that we were on, and I spent a lot of my time chasing checks that ultimately were not going to really ever materialize with the model that we had, because it was a sustainable model and it was a revenue generating model, but it just was never going to be, as to one of your points, big enough. And so, I think that's why this is awesome here, is because I think as an industry and as startups and entrepreneurs, it's an opportunity that, as Vicky said, revenue is key. It's like, let's recalibrate. Let's think about how you're building a business from day one, and not necessarily chase the traditional VCs, but come to places like California and others where there are investors that do have different expectations and do have different interests than what the traditional Sand Hill Road, Silicon Valley VC has, because those guys are not going to fund the majority of companies if they truly are music. As Vicky pointed out, they don't really like music, right? You got to find people that understand it and want to support it and are in it for the same reasons that you are.
And they have to understand it enough that they understand the problem as well as the solution. I also think that Gimme suffered from the lens that there's only one Apple, one Google, because in their eyes, you were competing with Spotify, even though you were not competing with Spotify at all, but they could not wrap their head around that.
I don't think they understood the space well enough. We definitely were not competing with Spotify. And the good news is I think that, like you said, it did work on these other levels, and there are lots of opportunities for people to build things in music that are exciting and that fans want and that will help artists earn while they sleep, which I think is the most important thing that I always say is, artists don't need more dashboards, they don't need more tools, they need more money, and they need to be able to create more art and create more music.
Yes, exactly. And, at a very high level, this is all about, are you helping to fuel artists, labels, and publishers' business? If the answer to that is yes, that's great. But are you looking for artists, labels, and publishers to fuel your business? If that's what you want, it probably won't work. So you have to really think about, what are these tangible values that we're actually going to deliver and that we might help these companies reach their KPIs, more revenue, more fame for artists, boosting streams, all of those things. So that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, Vicki.